"You don't have a home, and I don't have a mother," said the little girl to the young, homeless black woman at the train station, her words echoing through the nearly empty Chicago terminal on that cold Thursday in December. Helena Williams, 29, adjusted the worn coat that was all she had left of her former life, and looked at the child with her huge, curious eyes. 6 months ago, she had run the most promising architecture firm on the South Side, with million-dollar contracts and a bright future ahead of her. Today she slept in train stations and shelters, but her eyes still carried that fierce determination that made anyone think twice before underestimating her. "How do you know I don't have a home?" Helena asked softly, sitting down on the bench next to the girl. "Because I stay here sometimes with my dad waiting for the train, and you're always here drawing in that notebook," replied the little girl, pointing to the notebook of architectural designs that Helena held like a treasure. "My name is Olivia. Daddy said that Mommy went to live with the angels, but I think she just left because she didn't love us anymore." Helena felt her heart tighten, but something else caught her attention. Through the station windows, she saw a tall black man in an impeccable suit talking on the phone with a tense expression. He gestured nervously, clearly in an important discussion, completely oblivious to his daughter talking to a stranger. "Is that your father?" Helena asked, watching the man with growing interest. "Yes, he works a lot, always on the phone. Sometimes I think he's forgotten I exist," Olivia said with a sadness that cut Helena like a knife. What the girl didn't know was that Helena had recognized the man immediately. Marcus Thompson, CEO of Thompson & Associates, one of Chicago's largest urban development companies. More importantly, he was a potential client that Helena had tried to win over months before her life fell apart completely, and who had destroyed her life. Tiago Santos, her former partner and ex-fiancé, who had not only stolen all of their company's resources, but had also spread devastating lies about her professional competence to the entire Chicago architectural community. The same Tiago who now flaunted his success on social media, living luxuriously with the money he had stolen from her while she struggled to get one meal a day. "Do you design houses?" Olivia asked reverently, leafing through Helena's notebook. "I used to," Helena corrected, but then paused, looking at the girl, at her distant father, at her own drawings. Something began to form in her mind. Not just a plan for survival, but something much more ambitious, much more satisfying. "Actually," she said, a barely perceptible smile touching her lips, "I still draw, and maybe I've just found the perfect project." Olivia smiled, unaware that she had just become a crucial piece in the most elaborate plan for revenge Helena had ever conceived. A plan that would not only rebuild her life, but completely destroy the man who thought he had one. Because if Tiago thought he had buried Helena Williams forever, he was about to discover that he had only awakened something far more dangerous. A brilliant, furious black woman with absolutely nothing to lose. If you're wondering how a seemingly innocent conversation with a child could become the perfect weapon of revenge, be sure to subscribe to the channel to find out how Helena turned her greatest defeat into her betrayer's ultimate nightmare. Marcus Thompson finally put his phone away and walked over to where Olivia was chatting animatedly with Helena about architecture. His eyes revealed surprise as he recognized the woman his daughter had chosen as her confidant. "Olivia, I shouldn't be bothering," he began, but Helena stood up and extended her hand. "Helena Williams. I believe we met indirectly a few months ago. I was a partner at Williams and Santos Architecture." The recognition was immediate and uncomfortable. Marcus remembered perfectly the scandal that had destroyed that promising company. "Of course you were. I'm sorry about what happened, Dad. Helena designs beautiful houses. Look." Olivia leafed through the notebook enthusiastically, pointing to social housing projects that Helena had developed before her life fell apart. What Marcus didn't know was that 6 months ago, Helena had prepared an innovative proposal specifically for Thompson & Associates, a sustainable urban development project that would revolutionize affordable housing in Chicago. She had worked for weeks on that presentation, studying every detail of Marcus's company's projects. But on the morning of the most important meeting of her career, Helena discovered that her business account had been emptied. Tiago had transferred all the funds to an offshore account, canceled all ongoing contracts, and to complete the destruction, sent emails to all potential clients claiming that Helena had been diagnosed with serious psychiatric problems that rendered her professionally incapacitated. "It was a business misunderstanding," Helena said calmly to Marcus, her voice betraying only a fraction of the anger she felt. "Sometimes we trust the wrong people." At that very moment, Helena's phone vibrated. An Instagram notification. Tiago had posted a photo of himself toasting champagne at an expensive restaurant in Miami, with a caption, "Building empires while others build castles in the air. Clinking glasses, successful life Chicago to Miami." Helena closed her phone without letting the emotion show on her face. But Marcus noticed the momentary tension in her shoulders. What neither of them knew was that Tiago hadn't stopped there over the past few months. He had systematically contacted all of Chicago's renowned architects, spreading rumors about Helena's mental instability and technical incompetence. He had even created fake online profiles to post negative reviews of her work. "You know," Marcus said thoughtfully, looking at Olivia's drawings in her notebook, "our company is always looking for talent in social architecture. Maybe we can talk about future opportunities," Helena smiled. But her eyes flashed with something Marcus couldn't quite interpret. "I'd love to, Mr. Thompson. In fact, I have some very specific ideas about urban development that might interest your company." The train arrived, interrupting their conversation. As Marcus helped Olivia onto the train, Helena murmured softly, "Thank you for seeing me, Olivia. People like you remind me why it's worth fighting for, alone again on the platform." Helena opened her notebook and began writing feverishly. Not architectural drawings this time, but a detailed plan. On the first page, she wrote, "Justice Project Phase 1 Strategic Approach via Thompson and Associates." Because Helena had realized something crucial in that conversation. Marcus Thompson wasn't just a potential client. He was the key to completely destroying the life Tiago had built with stolen money. And better yet, Tiago had made the fatal mistake of completely underestimating the woman he thought he had buried forever. That night, in the shelter where she slept, Helena took a small digital recorder out of her pocket, a habit she had developed in the last few months of paranoia. But this time, she hadn't recorded out of fear. She had recorded out of strategy. Every word Marcus said about future opportunities was recorded, along with Olivia's genuine reaction to his plans. As she listened to the recording through her cheap headphones, Helena smiled for the first time in months. Tiago had spent 6 months celebrating his victory, posting luxurious photos, publicly humiliating her and believing she would never recover. He had built his new life on the foundation of her destruction without realizing he was building his own mausoleum. Because what Tiago Santos didn't know was that Helena Williams hadn't given up on architecture. She had just shifted her focus. Now she designed revenge with the same mathematical precision she once used to create buildings. And like any good architect, she knew that the most solid foundations were built in silence, away from prying eyes, preparing the ground for structures that would last forever. Each new humiliation only strengthened something inside her that Tiago couldn't see. A silent force fueled by the very injustice he tried to impose, growing in the dark like the deepest roots, preparing to emerge when he least expected it, and with a devastating force that would bring his entire world crashing down in a matter of days. 3 weeks had passed since the encounter at the station, and Helena had become a constant presence in the Thompsons' lives. Marcus had offered her a small freelance project, redesigning the lobby of one of the company's buildings, and Helena had accepted with calculated enthusiasm. What Marcus didn't know was that every inch of that building was being meticulously studied for reasons that went far beyond architecture. "Helena, you have an impressive talent," Marcus commented, reviewing the sketches in the Thompson and Associates office. "These integrated sustainability concepts are exactly what we need for our new social development line." Helena smiled, but her eyes were focused on Marcus's computer screen, where she had noticed an open email from Santos Development Group, Tiago's new company, apparently. He was trying to close a $1 million deal with Thompson and Associates for a low-income housing project on the south side. "Interesting," Helena murmured, discreetly pointing to the screen. "Are you considering partnerships with Santos Development? Are you familiar with their work?" Marcus asked, curious. "I know Tiago Santos personally," Helena replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "In fact, we worked together for a few years. Perhaps I can offer some insights into his working methods." What Marcus couldn't have imagined was that Helena had spent the last 3 weeks doing something much more sophisticated than just drawing architectural plans. She had hired David Chun, a freelance digital investigator specializing in financial crimes, using her last savings. "What did you find out about Santos Development?" Helena asked during a discreet meeting at a cafe far from downtown. David opened his laptop, revealing a screen full of financial documents. "Your suspicion was correct. Tiago Santos used funds stolen from Williams and Santos to create the new company. But he was smarter than that. He created a complex network of shell companies to launder the money." Helena studied the documents with growing satisfaction. "Go on. Better yet, he's using forged documentation to obtain government contracts. Look at this." David pointed to a series of certifications. "All of these environmental and safety licenses are forged. If someone reports this to federal authorities, he would not only lose the contracts, but face federal criminal charges." Helena added, her eyes shining. David nodded. Exactly. We're talking about fraud in government contracts, money laundering, and document forgery. Guaranteed prison time. At that moment, Helena's phone vibrated. An Instagram notification showed Tiago at a lavish party in Miami surrounded by women, with the caption, "When you're smart enough to leave the losers behind and build a real empire, Chicago Tamiyami self-made no time poor people." But what really made Helena's blood boil was seeing a thread in the comments where Tiago responded to someone asking about his former partner. Helena Williams, poor thing. She had a complete mental breakdown. I hear she's living on the streets now. Sometimes people without emotional stability can't handle the pressure of real business. It's better this way. Business is for the strong. Helena calmly closed her phone, but David noticed the change in her expression. May I ask what you plan to do with this information? Tiago Santos built his empire on my ruin, Helena said, her voice controlled but laden with cold determination. He believes he has completely destroyed me, that I am just a broken black woman he can publicly humiliate whenever he wants to feed his ego. She leaned forward, her eyes fixed on the evidence scattered across the table. But he made two fatal mistakes. First, he completely underestimated my ability to get back on my feet. Second, he left digital traces of all his fraud because he thought he would never be investigated. David smiled, recognizing the strategic gleam in Helena's eyes. And what's the plan? Marcus Thompson is about to close a $15 million deal with Tiago for housing development on the south side. A project that will directly affect low-income communities. People like me, Helena explained, organizing the documents. I'm going to present this evidence to Marcus. Not as personal revenge, but as a civic duty. Smart. But that's not all, is it? Helena smiled for the first time with genuine satisfaction. No, that's not all. When Marcus cancels the contract and reports the fraud to federal authorities, Tiago's downfall will only be the first act. Because I've discovered something even more interesting about the other investors in Santos Development. She opened a separate folder. Tiago didn't just steal from me. He has a whole network of small investors, mostly Black and Latina women entrepreneurs whom he convinced to invest their savings in projects that never existed. We're talking about at least 20 victims totaling more than $2 million in fraud. How did you find this out? Patience and method. Over the past few months, while everyone saw me as just another homeless woman, I was building a federal case against him. Every arrogant post on social media, every public lie about my mental instability, every time he publicly humiliated one of his victims, all documented and with evidence. David looked at Helena with new respect. You're not just planning revenge. You're orchestrating systematic justice. Exactly. And the best part. Helena leaned back in her chair, a satisfied smile on her lips. Tomorrow, I have a meeting with Marcus to present my findings about Santos Development. On Friday, Marcus will confront Tiago with the evidence. And on Monday, Tiago will discover that underestimating a brilliant black architect was the biggest strategic mistake of his mediocre life. That night, while Tiago was probably celebrating yet another imaginary victory in Miami, posting photos of a life built on stolen money and destroyed reputations, Helena was finalizing the last details of a plan that would take exactly 6 months to execute. The same amount of time she had spent rebuilding her life from scratch. Because while Tiago had spent his energy publicly humiliating her and building a facade of success, Helena had spent every day of those 6 months doing something he would never learn to do. Working quietly, precisely, building something solid on true foundations. What Tiago Santos was about to discover was that destroying a woman like Helena Williams did not make her disappear. It only turned her into something far more dangerous than he could ever imagine. Something that grew in the dark like the deepest roots, preparing to emerge with a devastating force that would bring his entire world crashing down in a matter of days. On Friday morning, Helena walked into the Thompson & Associates office carrying a briefcase containing 6 months of meticulous research. Marcus greeted her in his office with a smile. Expecting an update on the lobby project, Marcus, before we talk about architecture, I need to share something extremely important about Santos Development, Helena said, her voice calm but laden with urgency. As someone who has worked directly with Tiago Santos, I feel I have a moral obligation to alert you to certain irregularities. Marcus leaned forward, intrigued. What kind of irregularities? Helena methodically opened the folder, revealing documents organized with architectural precision. Fraudulent federal environmental certifications, money laundering through shell companies, and embezzlement of funds from at least 20 small investors totaling over $2 million. Marcus's face hardened as she presented each piece of evidence. Forged bank statements, compromising emails, falsified certifications, all marked, dated, and cross-referenced like a perfect architectural blueprint. My God, Helena, this evidence, where did it come from? 6 months of discreet investigation, When Tiago destroyed my company and my reputation, he thought he had completely eliminated me from the game, Helena explained, a cold satisfaction in her eyes. But he made the fatal mistake of underestimating a black architect who works best under pressure. Marcus studied the documents with growing horror. We're talking about federal crimes here. If I sign this contract knowing this information, you would become an unwitting accomplice. Exactly what I needed you to know before making any decisions, Helena replied, watching the realization wash over Marcus's face like a wave. At that moment, Marcus's phone rang. Tiago Santos was on the line, probably to press him about signing the $15 million contract that was scheduled for that afternoon. Answer it, Helena suggested, a barely perceptible smile touching her lips. Actually, put it on speakerphone. I think you'll want witnesses to what you're about to hear. Marcus pressed the button and Tiago's arrogant voice filled the room. Marcus, my friend, I hope you're ready to make history today. This project is going to revolutionize affordable housing in Chicago, and your company is going to be at the forefront, Tiago. I need to ask you a few questions about your environmental certifications before we proceed, Marcus said, consulting the documents Helena had provided. The confidence in Tiago's voice faltered slightly. Certifications? Sure. Everything's in order. Why, do you ask? Specifically about EPA certificate number 7742B issued in March of this year. Marcus read directly from the forged document Helena had discovered. Total silence on the other end of the line. Helena could practically hear Tiago's neurons racing, trying to figure out how Marcus had obtained such specific information. I can send you a copy later. Bureaucratic issues. You understand? Actually, Tiago, you don't need to worry about that, Marcus said, his voice taking on a professional harshness that Helena had never heard before. Because I just found out that this particular certificate never existed, just like half of your licensing documents. The sound of something falling echoed through the phone, probably Tiago knocking something over in his luxurious Miami office. Marcus, I think there's been a misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding, Tiago. There's systematic fraud, money laundering, and embezzlement. And it's all documented right here on my desk at this very moment. Who? How did you? Tiago's voice was beginning to crack, panic finally penetrating his usual arrogance. It was then that Helena leaned into the phone microphone, her clear, controlled voice cutting through the static. Hi, Tiago, Helena Williams, remember me? The woman you said had a complete mental breakdown. The silence that followed was so deep that Helena could hear her own breathing. Then a slow, shaky exhale on the other end of the line. Helena, are you there? Surprised? I would be too if I were you, Helena continued. Each word laden with years of humiliation turned into power, you see. While you were posting photos in Miami celebrating with stolen money, I was busy doing what I do best, building something solid. Only this time I built a federal case against you instead of a building. Helena, look, can you give me a minute to explain? Explain? Helena laughed, a humorous sound that made Marcus look at her with new respect. Tiago, you had 6 months to explain. Instead, you chose to publicly humiliate me, spread lies about my mental stability, and build an empire on money you stole from me and 20 other women. Marcus watched in fascination as Helena systematically destroyed Tiago's facade with the same precision he used to design buildings. But the most amusing part, Helena continued, is that you documented everything, every arrogant Instagram post, every despicable comment about my situation, every lie about your self-made origins, it's all here, printed and cataloged as evidence of your systematic arrogance. Helena, please, we can work this out between us. Resolve, oh Tiago, it's already been resolved. Marcus won't be signing your contract. In fact, he's reporting your activities to federal authorities this afternoon. And I'm sure the other 20 victims will be very interested to know that we finally have enough evidence for a solid criminal case. Marcus nodded in agreement, already reaching for his phone to make the necessary calls. Tiago's breathing was noticeably faster. Now, you don't know who you're messing with. I have lawyers, resources, you had resources. Helena corrected gently. Stolen resources, which will now be frozen while a federal investigation determines exactly how much you owe in restitution. But hey, at least you still have those nice photos of Miami, right? The sound of Tiago slamming down the phone echoed through the room. Marcus and Helena were silent for a moment, processing what had just happened. My God, Helena, Marcus finally said. That was intense. Helena calmly closed the folder. 6 intense months, but necessary. Men like Tiago thrive because we let them. Because when they destroy lives, especially those of women like me, the system assumes we'll never recover enough to fight back. That afternoon, while Marcus made calls to the FBI and federal prosecutors, Helena received a series of desperate messages from Tiago. Pleas, threats, pathetic attempts at negotiation. All from a man who 6 hours earlier was still posting arrogant stories about leaving failures behind. The last message received at 6:47 p.m. simply said, "Please, Helena." "You win. Stop this." Helena looked at the message, then deleted it without replying. Because the truth was that she hadn't started this. She had only ended it. And she had ended it with the same architectural precision that Tiago had underestimated when he thought that destroying a brilliant black woman would be as simple as firing a maid. The following Monday, Helena woke up to headlines in Chicago newspapers about a massive urban development fraud scheme being investigated by the FBI. Santos Development had its assets frozen. Tiago was wanted for questioning, and 20 families finally had hope of recovering their stolen savings. But that public victory was only the first act of something much bigger that Helena had been quietly building. A future where no one could ever try to bury her alive again. Because now she had allies, resources, and most importantly, absolute confirmation that her intelligence was a weapon far more devastating than any mediocre man could ever understand or fight. 2 years later, Helena Williams was photographed for the cover of Architectural Digest magazine as Architect of the Year, highlighting her revolutionary social housing projects in Chicago. Her firm Williams & Thompson Sustainable Development had become a national benchmark in inclusive architecture. Marcus had become her partner, and together with Olivia, now 8 years old, and Helena's proud adopted daughter, they formed a family united by adversity turned into purpose. "Helena, the federal court just called," Marcus announced, entering her office. Tiago was sentenced to 15 years for federal fraud. "Full restitution to the victims?" Helena just nodded, focused on the projects scattered across her desk. Tiago had become irrelevant to her life. Just another criminal facing his deserved consequences. "Daddy, is Helena going to win the award today?" Olivia asked, hugging Helena. "Yes, sweetie. And you know why?" Helena knelt down to the girl's level. "Because when someone tries to knock us down, we have two choices. Stay down or use that experience as a foundation to build something even greater." That night at the Palmer House Hotel, Helena received the National Social Architecture Award. During her speech, she looked out at the audience of 500 renowned architects, many of the same ones who had doubted her when she was on the streets. 2 years ago, a man thought that by destroying me, he would build his empire. Today, he is in a federal prison cell while I am here building literal bridges between communities he despised. Helena said, her voice echoing through the hall. "The best revenge is not to destroy those who have hurt you. It is to become so brilliant that they become completely irrelevant to your story." Marcus and Olivia applauded in the front row, along with the 20 women Helena had helped recover their stolen investments, all now thriving in new ventures. Meanwhile, in a federal prison in Illinois, Tiago Santos watched the news about Helena's success through the bars of his cell, finally understanding that he had underestimated not just a brilliant woman, but a force of nature who had turned his greatest injustice into the motivation for an unforgettable legacy. Helena proved that true architecture is not just about building buildings. It's about rebuilding lives, including her own, with foundations so solid that no storm can bring them down. If this story of overcoming adversity and justice touched your heart, subscribe,